Do you need help in your relationship? Or maybe your relationship is going great and you just want to strengthen the bond between the two of you. In any case, tune in to Ask Mama E, a show intended to assist in creating and keeping the strongest relationships. Join and watch Mama E, the relationship expert, using her wisdom to guide others into forming stronger bonds.
Hi, everybody. This is Mama E. Thank you so very much for joining us again as we delve into various topics as it relates to marriage and relationships. I have several comments or questions that I've received over a period of time from various listeners or viewers. And so we're going to start a segment that we're going to call Mama E's Mailbox. So I have one of those questions that was posed to us recently that I thought we'd perhaps start with today. The question was, is God angry with me because I live with my boyfriend? Interesting question. And I try not to answer questions with my opinion, okay? Because we all have opinions. We all have a right to an opinion. I do try to find biblical answers if I can. Things that I can't find an answer for. I heard someone say that if God doesn't bother it, they don't either. So let's just talk a little bit today. And there again, because I'm going to try to stay away from my opinion, I'm going to give you the results of research that I've done, as well as some biblical perspectives. How's that? Biblical perspective. So is God angry with you because you live with your boyfriend? So let's start with, I don't know that it makes God angry. Now, again, you know, since all of us have opinions, you have yours as well. But in as much that our Father already knows what we're going to do, then I don't know that he sits on the throne just waiting for us to do it so he can be mad at us, so he can get the switch out. I do believe that as believers, we have an ultimate desire to please God. And I think that because he looks at my heart, you know, the scripture says that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. So that those of us who make decisions, perhaps that are led more by our carnal man, we make decisions based on our flesh. How's that? But in our hearts, we desire to really please God. So that I think, in my opinion, then that God is not angry with us because we made a fleshly decision. All right. Now, if that be the case, let's move then to whether or not we're actually talking about, do I live with my boyfriend or am I sleeping with my boyfriend? I think that those are two different questions because, you know, if you rent a room from someone and you know, you only occupy that room by yourself and the rest of the house is occupied by other people, you know, that might be different from living together in a matrimonial sense. Are you living together like married people? What do you say, Mama E? Are you doing what married people do? I think that's different. And so when we go to the Bible then to look for answers to that question, I think there is more said about us sleeping together, if it is an intimate relationship, if it's sexual in nature. That's not the same as I rent a room from someone and there is virtually no contact between the two of us. So, is there anything in the Bible about unmarried people sleeping together? Absolutely. Again, this conversation is not going to be an argument about whether or not it's right. We're not going to talk about whether or not saved people do this or unsaved people. At the end of the day, all of us are going to have to abide by the same rules. Okay, so if we're going to talk about sleeping together and a sexual connotation, there's much to be said then about that subject. So when we talk about then, is God angry with me for staying with, living with my boyfriend? Different question then. Does it bother God? Does God say anything about us having marital sexual relationships and not married? Now, when we talk about living together prior to legally getting married, let's talk about why. You know, I've had couples who have chosen to share living conditions because it was economically feasible. What am I saying? I'm saying that if they, in order to live in the type of apartment, the type of house that they like, it would require both of their incomes. And so they concluded then that two could live better than one. And so they made the decision to rent an apartment together. Many of these couples have already made the decision to get married. And so what they are trying to do now is to live in a manner that's just economically feasible. Okay? Again, this is not about me telling you what's right or best to do. I'm just going to give you several tips that hopefully you'll just think about as you make decisions in terms of what's best for you. When you make decisions as to whether or not your actions are pleasing to God, then I hope I just give you enough to think about so that you can make a wise decision. Okay, so we're talking then about cohabiting. That is the new word for shacking. You know, depending on what generation you're from, might determine what word you use to describe it. But we're talking about two people living together with all the benefits of marriage, if you will, but not having a legal right to those benefits. Okay, so when we talk about cohabitation, I found some interesting research the other day about whether or not couples who live together prior to marriage, whether or not their marriages are any more secure than couples who don't. And what I found that was fascinating was that the psychologists who had done this study had found that many couples who lived together prior to getting married got divorced quicker, earlier. That in many cases that these people who had lived together perhaps for years, and then they got married and ended up in divorce far quicker than couples who had not lived together. And I thought it was interesting. The more I read this study, I could kind of see his point, and I'm just going to give it to you. You do some research yourself and see what you come up with. But this is what he gave as a reason for why many of these marriages ended in divorce, even though they had lived together prior to getting married. And you know, many times the couples who chose to live together, you know, I pointed out that one of the reasons for cohabitation was financial, that we could share the bills, that we could live, you know, in a manner that was less expensive, you know, if we put our funds together. Another reason that many people choose to live together before getting married is to kind of test the water. I've heard that we want to see if we really even get along. We want to test the waters, even sexually. We want to make sure that, you know, we both satisfy each other, what have you. So that we've got any number of reasons why we might choose to live together before we actually get married. But back to the story that the psychologist shared. He said that in many cases, when a couple lives together, they are still living as if they're single from the standpoint of them having the freedom to come and go as we please, that this is my part of the house. This is what, you know, I have the freedom, the right to hang out with the boys or go out with the girls. And so because I can live with the freedom of singleness, even though we are preparing for marriage, does that make sense? That I still bring into the relationship a certain degree of self-centeredness, meaning that I kind of leave the door open. It can swing either way because neither of us really have committed to each other. So if in fact we're living in the household and we still have the freedom to do what we want to do, because after all, we're not married, when we get married, there is the possibility, there is the likelihood that we can bring those selfish tactics into the marriage. In other words, if before we got married, my money was my money, now that we are married and we should now be one, I'm not really ready to put our resources together so that we can both accomplish the goal that we've set. In other words, if rent has to be paid and we are both responsible for it, I can't come into a marriage saying, but this is mine. If in fact the Bible says that when a man gets married, that he leaves his mother and father and cleaves to his wife. What does that mean? That means then cleave is a word that connotates glue, if you will, that I am going to no longer live with my parents and accept the rules of that house, but we have now made rules for our house as husband and wife. And that means that we both have accepted a certain level of commitment, a certain level of that I want to bear responsibility for us both being okay in this house. So as you cleave now to this wife, and we sat down together and we look at the needs of the household, I can't say, well, this is my money, and I'm only going to use my money for what's good for me. Does that make sense? Many of us still do, but I'm not sure that cleaving really makes allowances for me to do whatever I want to do with mine, and you're on your own. So that was just the opinion of, and I apologize that I did not jot down the psychologist's name, but it was very interesting. And I can see how one would bring with them the single habits into a relationship, even though you decided to get married. Okay? All right, so that's just something for you to research and think about in terms of whether or not you bring bad habits into a marriage after you've lived together for a period of time. Okay, another thing I want you to think about, you know, when one of the first miracles that Jesus performed was at a wedding. And if you remember the story, they ran out of wine, and Jesus' mother came to him and said, we need more wine. And I thought about, if Jesus thought that, one thing was the same as the other, then for him to participate in making sure all of the guests had what they needed at the wedding sounds a little bit different to me. Sounds to me like Jesus cared about the wedding. And then I started to think, when you get married, you invite people to the ceremony. Those people are basically witnesses to the wedding. What are they witnessing? They're witnessing what you and your spouse said, so that if there were 100 people who heard you say that I will love and cherish this person, that I will stay till death do us part, in sickness and in health, all of those things that you said in front of witnesses. Must be a reason why perhaps it's necessary or a good thing for somebody other than the two of you to witness what you said to each other. When you get married, the wedding, the license, the marriage license, also has a place for witnesses on the license. It's not just the bride and groom who sign the marriage license, but typically either the maid of honor and the one of the groomsmen, the best man, somebody who was associated or affiliated with these two people who got married. Those two individuals also come together and sign as a witness to what these two people said. So I'll leave that for you to think about. Why are there witnesses, and why is it perhaps important to have witnesses to this marriage? I know that many of us get married for the sake of the performance. I call it a performance, when you line dance down the aisle and, you came just to, so that everybody could see the dresses, and, the flower girl dropped the petals, and it was just beautiful to see. But trust me when I say that getting married far exceeds the performance. It far exceeds, in God's eye, how beautiful the dresses were, and all of the participants. Marriage is actually designed by and orchestrated by God. It was his idea. I know we think it was ours, but he initiated the idea. And if we will approach it from his standpoint, there is a better likelihood that our outcome will be that he wants. He tells us that marriage is honorable, which means that he wants us to have a marriage that honors him. So then, if we're going to decide that we're going to make all of those declarations, if you will, in front of all of those witnesses, And in just a matter of sometimes days, months, we change our minds and we decide that maybe we've got a better idea, that the things that God said that He wanted you to do in terms of honor, the things that He wants you to do in terms of respect, when He tells you that this husband is supposed to love his wife like Christ loved the church. I just wonder, did we really buy into all of those things when we stood in front of the witnesses? Did we even intend to at that time? Or did we come into this marriage with the plan that if it doesn't work out like I think it ought to, if she doesn't cook like my mom did, if he doesn't make sure that, he does what I want him to do, all of those things, when we decide that those are the prerequisites for what makes us stay or leave in a marriage, I don't know that we can find Bible documentation that says many of the reasons that we give for leading, whether or not we can actually find those reasons in the Bible. In John chapter 4, verses 16 through 18, there's a story where Jesus met a woman at the well, and they were from different backgrounds. And she was pretty much saying to him that, your rules and your ways are different from mine. But I was interested to read the story where Jesus said to her to go get your husband. And the woman responded, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, you're right. Thank you for telling the truth, that you've had several, I think 4 or 5 husbands, and the one you're living with now is not yours. That says to me that even Jesus saw a difference between marriage and cohabitating. Why would He make it a point to say the one that you're living with now is not actually your husband? If they were the same, I don't think that it would have been necessary for Jesus to point out to the woman that you've had husbands, but the one you're living with now is not. So then, if there is a reason why even Jesus considered marriage different from cohabitating, that it is different from what I call counterfeit marriage. When you buy a purse that looks like a Gucci, that looks like a Booney and Dirt, that all of the name brands, and you can find somebody on the corner that sells a bag that looks like that. But that it couldn't possibly be real. It could not possibly be authentic, because you can't pay $15 for a purse that sells for $300. So it's counterfeit. And many of us have gotten accustomed to the counterfeit bag, counterfeit shoes, because it looks like the real thing. Many of us have chosen to live in relationships that look like the real thing. The neighbors see you all come and go together, and it looks like the way couples live. Even those of you who come and go to church, you look like you're married. You have children, and those children live with mom and dad, and it looks like the kind of setup that Jesus would have come to. But just recognizing that there are blessings that come from doing things God's way. In Proverbs, the 14th chapter and the 12th verse, it says there is a way that seems right to a man. That means that because it looks like marriage, because we do things like marriage, I want you to think about whether or not, if it's not God's way, then are the benefits the same? when he says that my ways are not your ways and my thoughts are not your thoughts, that says to me that there are differences, even though it feels good to me and I feel like, we can get along with doing it this way. If it's not the way that our Father set up, then it's not his way. And perhaps, just perhaps, and it's for you to think about whether or not the benefits are the same when we do things differently from what God orchestrated, from what he recommended. Another thought that I want you to consider in Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, the Bible says that we are to present our bodies a living sacrifice. So when we think about having intimate relationships before we actually marry, I wonder if we are presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice. What is a sacrifice? To me, a sacrifice is when I'm giving up something that I really want. If we go on a fast should be sacrificial in that I'm giving up something that I really enjoy. For me to give up coffee is not a sacrifice because I don't drink coffee. So that when I determine that I'm giving up something to the Lord, what makes it a sacrifice is that I'm giving up something that my body really wants. So it is with giving up the things that we enjoy doing, the things that everybody else is doing, even though God says you're to do it after you have become one. So that when he tells you to present your body as a living sacrifice, while you're still living, you're not in a coma, you're not dead, you make the conscious decision to do certain things because God said to do it. If we would stop and think about the benefits of doing things God's way. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it can be if we ask God to help us because our desire is to please him. Last scripture I want you to consider is in Romans, the 14th chapter and the 16th verse. And it says, don't let your good be evil spoken of. So then as believers, we want to be mindful of the things that we do and how it represents our Father. What we want to be mindful of is other people looking at us and are they saying, see, there's no real difference between Christians and non-Christians because they all do the same thing. I want you to be mindful as we close out our discussion for today that you don't want anything that you do to not represent Jesus well. Can I suggest that you be a good representative of Jesus Christ? Because as we enter into our marriages, whatever we're doing, what we want to do is do it as unto the Lord. I hope that something I've said will cause you to at least think about whether or not you're representing Jesus well in the decisions that you're making as it relates to marriage versus cohabitating. We'll talk again real soon. This has been Mama E, and I look forward to sharing with you again real soon.
Are you in the market to buy new appliances or to buy new furniture or a computer, but you are concerned about prices? Prices nowadays are simply astronomical, and you need to be able to purchase it low but in a convenient way. Let me introduce you to the Maxwell Club. The Maxwell's Club will allow you to be able to purchase directly from the manufacturer. The price of Maxwell's Club is only $39.99 a year. You can shop with thousands upon thousands of manufacturers. Finally, you as the consumer have the power to purchase like some of the major companies. As a benefit of membership, you get discounts and perks around the world at places that you shop at. Sign up today, www.maxwells.club.
Are you looking for a state-of-the-art facility to have your latest conference or retirement party? Do you need a space that can accommodate small or medium-sized events? The HC Multicultural Center is the perfect place if you need to accommodate 20 to 150 people for an intimate celebration. Our facility has a cafe with a beautiful lobby with robust parking. We have a 15-foot LED wall and a digital sound system to accommodate for live recordings, not forgetting our sophisticated live stream 4K and 6K camera setup. If you need to accommodate 100 plus people for a large meeting, it is the perfect place for your multicultural event with a friendly staff waiting to serve your needs. When you want it done with class, do it with the HC Multicultural Center. Do you want to do a podcast? An actual video podcast, but don't have the equipment? Thought it would be impossible? Well, the impossible can become possible. Give us a call today. We can have your podcast on all of the major platforms in less than 3 days. Our staff is standing by to assist you.